Martin West, the political leader of the People's National Movement, and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley.
Even though the road is long, no matter what come, I know I'm gonna make it. Yes, I'm gonna make it. Even though the road is long, no matter what come, I know I'm gonna make it. Yes, I'm gonna make it.
Remember the days of toting water, anytime that you have to pay. Or when people pass and they see you, oh my Lord used to feel that shame. Wondering if this lasts forever, wondering when you will feel proud. If it's one thing that he didn't tell me, there is sunrise after each cloud. I say even though
The road is long, no matter what come, I know I'm gonna make it.
oh
Yes,
Lord,
I'm gonna make it.
even though.
What a night in Faizabad! My cabinet colleague, former chairman of the People's National Movement, Senator Franklin Khan, our Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, my cabinet colleague, Senator Robert Lee Hunt, your Minister of Public Utilities, Party Assistant General Secretary Daniel Duki, and also on stage here with me tonight is the vibrant, the energetic, the outstanding councillor, Maurice Alexander for Faizabad. And assisting us in mobilizing you here in the South-Southwest, Deputy Political Leader of the People's National Movement, Mrs. Jo Newell-Williams. My other cabinet colleagues, led by the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, Senator Kazim Hussain. Councillors all experience, retiring, and perspective. Permit me a moment to join the recognition and thanksgiving for one particularly outstanding PNM councillor, Councillor Christine Neptune. Our party is 63 years old, and Councillor Neptune, retiring this year, when she could still have gone on, because she's very youthful. But she represents the best of service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I have been involved in campaigning in this party for many, many years. And I have also been involved in the leadership of this party in opposition and government. And honestly, I cannot recall going to a PNM function where the public is expected to be there, party supporters in particular, and Councillor Neptune from Faizabad was not there. I cannot recall a meeting called at Balize House for councillors or for whoever is required to be there, and Councillor Neptune was among the absentees. She is an outstanding citizen who had put service before self. And in 2019, as she gives way to the young bloods, to the new ones, we simply want to say to her, thank you. It is people like you. It is people like you who caused the PNM to have been of service to this country for 63 years. And it's service like that and records like that that will cause this party to serve this country for another 600 years. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not a party in the ordinary sense of the word. Our fundamental documents tell us that. Dr. Williams told us that. But instead, we are a rally for all, cutting across race, color, creed, and class in the common cause of building a nation here in Trinidad and Tobago. And as we gather here in this season of a local election, I am so pleased to see so many of you out here tonight. But these are serious times. Tonight, you would have heard a report from the minister who has the responsibility for the country's energy and energy industries, our lifeblood, serious business. And you could not have gone away without thinking that that is a serious man engaged in serious business for a serious country. You would also have heard a report from the Minister of Public Utilities talking to you about your lights and your water and the economy. And you also would have come away knowing that that is a serious man talking serious business for serious people in a serious country. They are part of the team that I lead. And what you heard tonight, what you saw tonight, is how this team functions. Before I got here to join you, the last few hours I spent walking in the community in Labre, Ruslak, Otahiti, with Anand Maraj, our candidate for Otahiti Ruzilak. I met among the very many people who welcomed us in the streets of that area, I met a small group of young boys. Appears to be in the age of, like say, 11 to 7, or 8 or 10 of them grabbed onto me. But there was a leader in that group, and he asked me to make sure that I call his name tonight. Isaiah Lam, tonight is your night. He was demonstrating leadership of the group, organized them, and he brought them to meet the Prime Minister. And he asked me a few questions, and he was keen to know that his name should be called tonight. Much of what you heard from Senator Kang and Senator Leon tonight is about giving Isaiah and those young children a future. Ladies and gentlemen, in my office, I have a little plaque behind my head for many years. And it says that there's no success without change. And there's no change without conflict. In other words, if your situation is to change successfully, meaning for the better, if you want that success, you have embrace change. And if you embrace that change to get that success, expect that there will be conflict. Meaning, not everybody will agree. Not everybody will keep quiet. Not everybody will contribute. And sometimes worse, there are those who will undermine, destroy, and damage. Embodied in those two lines are the circumstances of the people of Trinidad and Tobago at this time. But as Prime Minister, I am not fearful, I'm not worried, because I believe in this country that the vast majority of people are decent, right-thinking, reasonable people, and they will understand and they will follow when they are properly guided. I believe that, and if I'm wrong, well then, so be it. But I have every confidence that I'm right. And I've seen you, and I know you. And of course, you know that you have a responsibility, first to understand by paying attention, and secondly, by being responsible in using the authority that you have. And you do have the responsibility for selecting those who run your affairs at local government and at the national level. If you relinquish that responsibility, then you will be like a ship without a rudder drifting on an ocean. Ladies and gentlemen, if we look at our circumstance, there was a time you heard tonight when in this country, the country was producing 240,000 barrels of oil per day. What Minister Khan didn't tell you, it wasn't ours. It belonged to somebody else. We never had shareholdings in Texaco and UBOT. It was other people that had that. So those 200,000 barrels or 170,000 barrels, we never had much of that industry until the P&M bought out the companies that were closing down and going away to give us a continuation in the business. In case you all don't know that, young ones, those production that they're talking about, 240,000 barrels, 200,000 barrels a day, that was for the English and other shareholders in those companies. We used to get a job there and a little kakada there, and in those days, a barrel of oil was $3. And when they couldn't make money like slavery, when it didn't matter, they give us freedom. When they couldn't make money, they then sold us. It was the P&M that bought what was left and paid for it, some in oil and some in cash. He paid $270 million, something like that, for Texaco. You haven't buy a good car for that now. But of course, we knew if we got it and we did what had to be done, we could give ourselves some opportunity to continue, and we did well. I remember hearing people saying when we bought that company that it was a bad idea. How many of you remember that? There were those in this country who said that the purchase of Texaco was a bad idea. And of course, we went through the changes, Twin Talk and the Petrotrim, bought Tisoro and so on and so on. The end result is that we were having a future based on oil. But oil is a wasting asset. As you pump it out of the ground, no more is growing in there. The wells produce less and less and less over time. And unless you find new fields, every day you pump out a barrel, if you don't find a new field, you're 1 barrel less in your reserves. So we move from that to where we are now, especially now, where we have all these bills to pay. All these bills to pay, because over the years, the government were paying more and more of your bills, paying your water rate, paying your hospital bills, paying your road surfaces. In other countries, in many countries, the government makes no contribution to your water rate. The government makes no contribution to your light bill. The government makes no contribution to your child going to school. But we take all of that for granted as the oil goes down and down and down. Now we're down at what, 68,000 barrels a day? With the bills much, much higher. And even so, there are those who still will not understand that we require serious leadership, serious management if we are to go forward so that Isaiah Lamb and his friends in Labrie, who I met tonight, could have a future. Our reserves in gas right now, if we don't find new gas, it'll only keep us in the business for another 10 to 12 years. How many of you expect to be alive and around and happy in 10 to 12 years? All of us. But if we don't do what has to be done to find new oil and gas, you'll be here, but without that business. What is the replacement business you're going to go into? Don't answer. But I tell you something. We used gas. You see it from where? I see it from Tobago. I used to be in Tobago and seeing it off the East Coast. We were burning the gas. But in the 1970s, we changed. I told you about change. The P&M again, P&M had a gas policy where we would no longer burn off the gas as flares. So low pressure gas associated with oil, we'll compress it offshore, bring it onshore, and start a business with gas. Our first fertilizer plant. Remember that? And then later on, as we found gas when we were looking for oil, we had a lot of gas in our hands. What do you do with it? Let's start a gas business. Let's try and market that gas. I was a young geologist leading a team here in Trinidad and Tobago when we hosted the Latin American Geological Congress. Off the north coast of Trinidad, the NCMA, we were looking for oil. Deminex and Ajip, we found gas, no oil. And that gas sat there for years. Nothing happening to it until a P&M government, P&M again, a P&M government under Patrick Manning. I happen to have been in that cabinet with Frankie Khan, Eric Williams, and there were 4 geologists in that there. It was Patrick Manning as Prime Minister, Frankie Khan, a geologist, Eric Williams, and myself. And we were staring down the situation. We were in an IMF program. I'm sure you all forgot that. The NAR had taken this country to the IMF after the oil collapse on the chambers. The NAR came in 86 and they went straight to the IMF. And when we came in 91, this country was in an IMF program. And we had a choice to make. Whether go as Trinidad and Tobago, what did we have? How could we change our future? And we sat down night and day, facing the superior intellect of those who were telling us that we could not have in this country an LNG business. Because the experts, especially from Amoco, were telling us that our idea of having an LNG business was pie in the sky and they wanted no part of it. Amoco was the big heavyweight here at the time. And Patrick Manning, Ken Julian, and 3 geologists in the cabinet, we believe we could do it. And I remember after Mr. Manning went to a meeting in Chicago and came back, we were more than convinced, but we couldn't get anywhere until British gas came on the stream and bought the gas on the North Coast. The gas that was lying there since the 1970s, when they bought the NCMA field up there. British gas, persons who we convinced that this was doable, agreed to take part. And then Amoco wouldn't allow British gas to take part and leave them out. So Amoco came on board. That is how we got the first LNG train in this country. And timid as we are and were, we took 10% shareholding in the company. We still have that, thankfully. 10% in train 1. When that showed success, because immediately we became a supplier of gas to Europe and to the Northeast United States. And we at one time were the biggest supplier of gas to the US East Coast, Trinidad and Tobago. And gas was making decent money. At that time when we started out, it was about $5 or $6. It went as high as $13 a unit. It's now $2.50. But the important thing is that we're in the business. Because you see, that decision of the P&M to go from oil to gas is what put us in the gas business. No other political party could point to those fundamental changes that change this country, you know. None. Every time there's a fundamental change in this country for the betterment of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, it involves the People's National Movement. So we got into the LNG business. So train 1 was humming along and printing money for all the shareholders, Cabot, Repsol, BP. So they want a train 2 and they want a train 3. And I'm not clear how we ended up with no shareholding in train 2 and train 3. So we moved from pie in the sky, business that can't make no sense, that could never happen, But train 2 and train 3, they make sure we got no shareholding in that. Just reflect on that. But by the time they got to train 4, we realized what's happening to us. We got a shareholding in train 4. We have 11% in train 4. But if you have bad leadership, you could be in trouble. Imagine the other day, a former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago in the Parliament demonstrating an ignorance that was frightening. Kamala Prasad Bissesa did not know, after 5 years as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, if we had any shareholding in the LNG business, and if so, what the shareholding was. This is a woman who chaired the cabinet for 5 years, was supposed to be taking fundamental decisions on your behalf for 5 years, and get up in the Parliament, bold as brass, demanding of the minister to tell her what is the shareholding, as though he is her school teacher. But that is the difference between us and them. They are about rara, bacchanal, racism, hatred, Cambridge Analytica, undermining, self-serving, thieving. We are about building a future for Trinidad and Tobago. So with our best efforts in the last 3 decades, we have not found a large pool of oil in this country. But you remember, the last Prime Minister came on TV one night with a bottle of oil. She and the chairman of Petrotrin, and tell you we found Jubilee oil, and that there's going to be another oil boom, and she promised not to waste the money from the boom. All we ended up there with out of that was a scandal at Soldado, which up to this day has not been unraveled. We have not found an oil field, a significant oil field in this country in the last 30 years. You understand? Over 40 years. So our fortunes in oil has been changing. We have a refinery that refines oil, but our own oil production has been going down and down and down from 240,000 barrels to 60,000 barrels and going down. In the meantime, we had made, fortunately, the shift to gas, and I'll come to that just now. But the bottom line is this. By 2019, you having elected me Prime Minister in 2015, my job was not to continue the foolishness that was going on before. My job and my portion was to fix and deal with what I was confronted with. What was I confronted with when you elected me in 2015? I was confronted with being a PNM Prime Minister. That is the first thing. That is the first thing I had going for me. I was a Prime Minister of a party with supporters like you and citizens like the rest of the country who will understand what the Prime Minister has to do. You heard about the circumstance of the Minister of Finance being confronted with all these bills to pay, keeping every public servant on the payroll. Everybody want more. Debts to pay, short-term debt. The last thing they did before they left office is to borrow as much money as they could possibly have borrowed on short-term contracts. 500 million there for 6 months repayment. $1 billion there. We didn't even know until a year and a half after we were in government that Tech had borrowed $1 billion. Other small companies, as I speak to you now, tomorrow, and like yesterday, there's a case going on in the courthouse right now where EMBD, anybody know what EMBD is? EMBD, the most nondescript of state companies, is sued by a contractor for $1.2 billion. No. For them to sue that, somebody give them contract of over 1-point-something billion. Because if he was working, and after they lose the election, the contractor is saying he is owed. And this is not owed, this is certified payments. The certifiers have certified that payment. So all we have to do now is pay it. And they come inside the parliament as mouthpiece for the contractor, demanding, pay the contractor. We say, not on your Nelly. We will pay after we find out if the money is really owed. And the reason why they're in the court now is because your EMBD lawyers, two Queen's Counsel, in the court, arguing that that money is not really owed. But look at the size of the expenditure and the exposure. One contractor among many, because we have lawsuits coming out through heirs. One contractor claiming that he is owed $1.2 billion and he has certificates to show. That is what we're facing. You heard tonight about a contractor who did $1 billion in work in the waterworks and not one drop of water. Well, he got a contract for $1 billion. That was the last $1 billion in the NGC account. And the day the election was called, he watched for the results. He saw the PNM winning. He left the country. He left the contract and never come back. And when we look at the contract, what do we see? We see 80% of the money was paid for 40% of the work, the contractor in Panama. And I have to listen to Munilal and Kamla and Gopi Singh and Rambachan telling me about how incompetent this government is and how bad it is and how unfit I am to be prime minister and them coming back in election. I keep telling you all, I have one vote and I intend to vote against them. Or look at vote for them for their vote. So, the refinery has the capacity of refining in its current state up until when we shut it down there, 140,000 barrels a day. And it has the workforce to go with it, and all the costs to go with it, and all the paraphernalia. But we are only producing a fraction of that. So the business that we were involved in moved to a point where instead of refining the oil produced in Trinidad at the level that it was being produced when the refinery was so configured, you, the taxpayer, was now, in order to keep that refinery operating, you were now having to import every day, every morning you wake up, 100,000 barrels of oil. Let me repeat that. Every time you wake up in the morning, to keep the refinery going the way it was, you had to buy from all over the world at world market price, because nobody giving you the oil for nothing. You had to go to the market and buy it, and you know oil price goes up, down, and across, and you pay in US dollars. You had to buy that, 100,000 barrels, okay? But when you put it through the refinery, the configuration of the refinery and the operations of the refinery, you would now lose on the best month $3 US a barrel per day, or as high as $7 a day, $7 a barrel per day. So you're buying 100,000 barrels, knowing that as you refine it in your machine, you will lose between $3 and $7 per barrel. That is what the Petroleum refinery was. All those who you hear talking, they're only talking part of the conversation. And it's an important part that they talk, how workers are affected by it and how contractors and communities around are affected. That is true, and we understand that. But you must also see the other side of the story. The refinery was the main money loser in our involvement in the oil business. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Bible, written there, God give us two hands. Say if your left hand offend you, what do you do with it? So if we were going to fix, and by fix here I mean stay in the oil business, we had to look for where that problem was. And we didn't do it because we don't like refinery workers or we vector the OWTU. We did it because the economics were there for all of us. Previous prime minister and minister They ignored it. But I, coming in 2015, could not ignore it. You know why? There was a bill to be paid in August 2019 of 850 million US dollars. Now August come and gone, eh? All of you are happy now that nothing ain't changed. Well, sun still shining, rain still falling, we're still fetting in Trinidad. But if we were not in a position to deal with that, all hell would have broken loose in this country. And your quality of life would have changed so drastically that you yourself mightn't make it out. So as your Prime Minister in 2015, 2016, 2017, I did something that no other Prime Minister had to do. I addressed this nation on the issue of Petrotrin in January morning. And after we studied, I came back and I addressed the nation again and told you what we were facing and what we had to do. That is what a responsible Prime Minister is supposed to do. And now I have to listen to foolishness from idiots who make $100 a column every weekend talking about we shut down Petrotrin in secret. I addressed this nation twice on the basis that you are decent, right-thinking, educated, and sensible folk. I do that. And I told you the same problem. No news here. But the problem was this. That money could only have been repaid or refinanced if the Ministry of Finance, acting for the government, for the state, had taken over the responsibility. Because the company did not have what it takes to pay it, and the company, as it existed there with a refinery guaranteed to lose $2 billion a year, could not go to a bank in that condition and borrow the money. So what was threatening us was one of two things. Either the Minister of Finance takes it over onto government debt, and that means that the country would automatically have been downgraded, and the country's national finance, not the 5,000 Petrotrin workers, but the entire 1.3 million of us, would have been feeling that pain. And worse, if there was a default, meaning that Petrotrin was not able to treat with the entire loan. Not a part, you know. You couldn't pay a part, you know. It's a bullet payment, the entire check. Give me a check for $850 or you have defaulted. That is what this government was facing. So when you hear all these speakers in this country talking as though these things don't exist, unless they want to speak to the entire conversation, tell them to just shut up and get out of your way. Some of them you expect that they know what I'm saying, but they will not tell you because they want to fool you. Some of them were in office like certain ministers of energy, one of whom told us that the reason why plants were shutting down in Point Lisas is because they were doing maintenance on the rigs, on the platforms. And as soon as the maintenance is over, we're back to normal. Lie. You know what it was? We need 4.2 billion cubic feet of gas per day to feed our plants in the country. They took that production down, or it went down on its own, I don't know which one, to 3.1 billion. One whole BCF of gas. You need 4.2, you're producing 3.1, and then the government changed and meet it there at 3.1. And that wasn't all. Now that we had moved our lifeblood from oil to gas, even the gas was now failing us because we weren't producing enough gas to feed the plants. So the plants were shutting down. They call it curtailment, meaning you need 10, you get 8. You need 9, you get 7. You need 20, you get 15. That was the state of affairs. And those plants are only profitable in the upper 10% of their capacity. If they're producing less than, let's say, 90%, when they get down to 85%, 80%, for whatever reason, they're losing money. It is the upper 10 and 15% where money is being made. So that curtailment issue was resulting in losses on the production side, meaning losses in tax revenue, and worse, billions of dollars in claims against NGC, which you own. That's what it is. You own the NGC. NGC was facing and is facing billions of dollars in claims for not being able to supply the gas as per the contracts. That is what we had to face and to deal with. So let's go back to the refinery. The company couldn't deal with the finance, facing a default, or pass it on to the Minister of Finance. If he deals with it, downgrade the whole country. What did your government do? What did your PNM government do? We decided to create an environment which will allow the debt to be refinanced without the Minister of Finance taking it on with a government guarantee. Meaning that we escape the downgrade and we make the loan be refinanced by the company. The only way we could have done that is to have restructured Petrotrin so that the new Petrotrin arrangements would have been bankable and bankable enough to go out to the international banking community and borrow and refinance the loan without the Minister of Finance being involved. And how we did that? We shut down the refinery, take it out of the equation. As part of the restructuring of Petrotrin, we have not shut down our involvement in the oil industry. I want to repeat that again for the nth time. We have not shut down Petrotrin. We have restructured the company. Petrotrin as a company now exists as Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited. It's the parent company. If your parents still there alive and they make you have a parent who's still alive, Petrotrin is there as a holding company. And of course, Petrotrin owns subsidiary companies that we have created. One of those subsidiary companies is the Heritage Company that Minister Khan spoke to you about tonight. And because we have shut down the refinery and not producing our own gas and diesel and so on, we had to put a company in place to supply the country with refined products, because we are now going to import diesel and gasoline and so on. So we created Siparia. And of course, the refinery is put in a separate company called Guaracara. In that arrangement, the company could have gone to the bank as they did under proper board, because outstanding citizens served on the board of Petrotrin, one of whom is the head of UTC. This humongous job appeared to us at the cabinet and at the board of Petrotrin, and we realized what we had to do. By that time, the chairman, the CEO of UTC had spent enough of his time on this assignment. He's an outstanding financier and was about to leave the board. The cabinet had to beg the UTC to allow him to remain as part of the team, because this assignment was so important that we needed him to remain until it was done. Unfortunately for the country, they agreed, and he played his role with the other board members in this period of difficulty when we were trying to take the company to the international market to refinance this loan so that we can get away from a default and from the Minister of Finance carrying it as a government debt. But of course, there are those in this country who want to know nothing about that. But I'm not surprised. It's not their job. That is the job of the People's National Movement. So that's what we did. And of course, it's all done. We said from day one, we would love to have the refinery restart. but not as a taxpayer entity, because the taxpayer is not in a position to buy oil, to bring it here, to refine it, and to lose $7 per barrel. But if somebody else, anywhere from anywhere in the world, has the ability or the own oil and they want to bring it here and use it, the facility is available. And I went further. I surprised you all in one of those addresses to the nation. I even surprised the head of the OWTU. I said, if the workers, through their union, based on what they were saying, if they are interested in going into the business of refining and the refinery is available, we will give them the first opportunity to do it, because we are building a new society in Trinidad and Tobago. And if a labor union wants to get involved in business, then count on the People's National Movement. And there are those in this country who are talking a lot of rubbish about conspiracy between the OWTU and the PNM. I could argue with Roger, I could argue with any one of them there, but having argued with them, I respect them and I could work with them, and that's what it's all about, because they have their interests and I have my responsibility. And when I said to them in that address to the nation that if you are interested, as long as you put forward a proposal that is robust and that can stand the same scrutiny as any other, we will give you the opportunity. And as fate would have it, at the end of a very transparent and deliberate and extended process, it turned out that the OWTU's proposal is the best proposal, and I make no apology for that. And I want to go further tonight to tell the OWTU, as long as your proposal is robust, as long as your proposal can stand business scrutiny, you can count on the government of Trinidad and Tobago to work alongside you to get it done. Because in these battles, in these fights for nationalism, in the fight for survival and sustainability, we are all in this together. And many people cannot visualize it, but we do, the same way they couldn't visualize LNG as a plant in Trinidad and Tobago, the same way they couldn't visualize anything in this country other than mayhem and manima. We could visualize the following. We could visualize the OWT leadership moving from pounding pavements and shouting across the street to being in the boardroom and taking serious decisions about serious investments that could make their members seriously rich. Because if they find an appropriate financier, which is one of the conditions laid down for them, we have just finished the proposal stage, they've put a proposal forward. We said, come forward, we give them 6 weeks, come forward and confirm that you have appropriate financing available. It doesn't mean that the OWTU has to have the money in the bank to do it. They could go out there, the government having selected them, they can now go out there and find a financier, because this is business. What they are engaged in is to make money, and all banks like to know people who are about to make money. So find a financier, we're looking for that. But the main thing is the refinery needs oil. Find an arrangement, either somebody who has oil, or somebody who can buy oil, but you need a supply of oil, crude oil, to use in the refinery. Those are the two main things. And of course, which union anywhere in the world has in its executive people who could run a refinery and take and run it? If you don't have skills, then you go in the marketplace and you hire the skills. It's as simple as that. So this we talk about Roger can run a refinery and OWTU can run a refinery, as long as it is your business plan requiring those kinds of technical skills, you go there and hire it. And that's all. But there are those who believe that if that happens, it will be a quantum leap in Trinidad and Tobago, but not the PNM. Because they portray us as being anti-labor. When labor is doing nonsense, we will tell them so. When labor is on the right track, we tell them so. When labor went into bed with Kamala Prasad, Bissessa and the UNC, we told them all they're going to get. Anyway, when labor left and started telling the country they wanted no part of the UNC because David Abdullah left the UNC on one count. Too much corruption. David Abdullah of the labor movement left the UNC government, in case you all forget. It was the incipience of corruption that caused MacLeod stayed. He stayed. Now, when they left and they came outside, when I made the call for the rape of the country's parliament under Section 34, Labour marched with us. Labour was out there, and we used to meet regularly because our country had called out to us, because the government had used the parliament to create a law so persons could escape the courthouse. It is Section 34 that brought the PNM and Labour into those meetings. And of course, when we came into government, I said to the OWTU, don't bother to threaten me. Don't bother to shout at me. You have a space in the boardroom, talk to us, and we want to talk to you. And if now is the time that they want to talk to us, welcome aboard. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the stage now in that process where we are waiting to see what the union comes to us with. And it is in everybody's interest in this country that they succeed in what they're engaged in. Whether it's Gasparillo, Marabella, San Fernando, Faizabad, or Scarborough, it is in our interest, and the government will do everything that is reasonable to make them succeed if they are serious. When we shut the refinery down to create these possibilities, a former Minister of Energy, Carolyn Siparia, I understand she's coming to run for local government election with COP. Well, they have votes to waste. As a former Minister of Energy, her only input into the conversation is that now we cannot sell any oil produced by Heritage because our crude is sour, and there's nobody in the world who wants to buy sour crude, meaning a crude that is high in sulfur. What a dotish comment. So there were two ministers of energy under the UNC. One, Kevin Ramnarine, who lied to this country and told us that the calamity that we were facing about a shortage of gas was temporary because platforms were being maintained, and when the platform maintenance was done, we'll go back to 4.2 billion cubic. So that was Kevin. He had taken the job from Carolyn, and now she's telling us, having restructured the company and created a company who is now going to focus only on looking for oil, finding oil, and selling oil at a profit, that we wouldn't be able to sell the oil. You just heard from the Minister of Energy that in 9 months, the company has made a profit of over $500 million. So we've moved this situation from a guaranteed loss of $2 billion if the refinery was still operating, to the new situation where Heritage is now in the column of profit. Ladies and gentlemen, that calls for a standing ovation. That calls for a standing ovation for Heritage. And all we can say to them, as you resume your seats, all we can say to them, "O ye of little faith." And I want tonight to congratulate those who have brought this about. The many boards of Petrotrin, the many persons who have offered to serve on boards, the technical people who are involved. And I must tell you, not everything have gone right. Some things didn't go well at one point in time, but you fix it. And that is what we think about and we talk about when we say getting the job done. This matter of the treatment of our involvement in the oil business, if we didn't get this job done in this way, it had the potential to destroy the future of Isaiah Lamb, who I met tonight in La Brea, who asked me to make sure I mention him tonight. It is his future I'm trying to secure. Them UNC ministers, them cuckoo don't cook. Them bread butter with New Zealand butter. and they leave Isaiah to butter his bread with lard. Ladies and gentlemen, if we had mishandled this situation, what would have been our future? Our future would have been straight to the IMF. And in case you all think that is a loose statement, if we could not treat with our finances as a nation, the lender of last resort is your portion. And we have been there before. The NAR took us to the IMF, and I was a member of the cabinet when we took the decision that we will not continue to be an IMF client. We'll tighten our belts and get out from under the IMF to make the decisions that have to be made to give us a chance to develop our nation. I was there, so I know that. And of course, if decisions are too difficult for leaders to make, what the country is short of, leaders. And thank God, this country is not short of political leadership because you have the People's National Movement. We have not given up on oil, starting in both crease, oil and gas. In gas, we set about to encourage the companies to continue to invest in our country. You would have heard me say that as Prime Minister, I consider myself the country's #1 salesman. Who can better speak for Trinidad and Tobago than its leader? I am this country's #1 salesman. But to be an effective salesman, you have to be respected. And you have to be honest. And you have to know what the hell you're talking about. Water. So, they made some changes in attempting to respond to the gas situation. They made some changes, but the changes that they made, saying that they are giving incentives to the oil companies, had a downside, or it had downsides to it. My grandfather always taught me that a cow that give a pail of milk and kick it down is of no use to the farmer. So they gave incentives to encourage the foreign companies to invest in this country. Those foreign companies invest for their shareholders, eh? They don't invest for you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. How many of you have shares in those companies? Every quarter they announce, if you follow the ticker tape on NASDAQ and Bloomberg, you will see how much profit they make for their shareholders. So when you're giving incentives for them to do things, understand it's not being done for you. You are incidental. But we decided to approach those companies and say to them, we are all in this together. Your shareholders, my shareholders. My shareholders are the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I took that conversation to all the major companies in Trinidad and Tobago. But guess what condition under which I was going? I was going to talk to them when the contracts at Point Lisas, some had expired, and our previous government couldn't be bothered to negotiate new contracts. They had them on month-to-month contracts. And you could imagine trying to negotiate with companies that know that your lifeblood is there, and they want better terms and conditions, and believe that you will give them whatever they want to stay here. They gave, let me give you one example. In investing abroad to look for gas, we had a regime in place where if you spend $100, you could write off that capital expenditure $20 a year. So it takes you 5 years to write it off against your taxes. So as you're writing it off, the country will still be getting a fair amount of tax from you going forward. Guess what them bright boys and bright girls do? Give an incentive to the oil companies who always want more incentives. Tell them, whatever you invest, and know you're investing big money because you're going way offshore now, you could write off 50% in the first year, that means you ain't paying no tax, because when you write off 50% of that huge investment in 1 year, you ain't have to pay no tax. And if your main tax supplier is not paying any tax, how did they intend to run this country? And then tell them, write off 30% the next year. So if you spend $1 billion on a few wells offshore, you could write off 80% of that in 2 years. And of course, if the well is dry, all is being written off. So who in real terms is paying for the dry hole? Come on, think, people, think. Who is paying for the dry hole if you're writing it off against the taxes due to the government? And that is the model that has been in place. We have changed it. That you go back to your original arrangement, write off 20% per year. And of course you have those who always on the negative side in this country. It will reduce, we're not giving incentives, and therefore it will reduce the investment. Nonsense. Nonsense. Their shareholders know how much they're extracting from this country, and nobody walks away from a bounty. When I became Prime Minister, the head of one of these major companies came to my office with charts to show me that the bottomless pit in which we were at the time in 2015, with oil prices down, gas prices down, and revenues down, to show me and to educate me that there's no money to come from that sector, from that company, until 2024. And of course, I had to say to them, that is your story, not mine. And of course, we have approached these companies, and the result is, looking at our situation versus their situation, you would have heard the Minister of Finance say that we have recovered $2.8 billion in revenues that were not before us, but as a result of the negotiations that we have initiated and that we have concluded, $2.8 billion more. And more importantly, we have changed the arrangement. We have put new arrangements in place going forward as to how the profits from LNG would be shared. In a situation where I just told you, we only had a 10% in Train 1 and an 11% in Train 4. And the shareholders of the other companies had all the rest. Has any government in recent times spoken to you about these issues? So the very thing that keeps you alive doesn't form part of the conversation. But this country is full of stupid talk from morning till noon, from noon till sunset. Well, when you come to a PNM meeting or you listen to a PNM meeting, you hear about the country's business and you are educated. I told you we're still interested in oil because there's still some substantial amount of oil in our formations around our country. You would have heard a couple of days ago, BHP announcing that the Ruby project has been sanctioned. It's an oil field, a very difficult oil field, very broken up. Because here in Trinidad and Tobago, all around us, because of where we are between South America and the Caribbean plate, it's all broken up, very broken up. But in the Ruby field, there is oil. But you could drill here and find oil, and go just there and drill again and find none, because it's a broken up field. BHP is a company that I first knew when I was a student. There's a place in Australia, big mountain called Broken Hill. And they found iron ore in that mountain and other minerals. And this company became big and rich by extracting these minerals from Broken Hill. Became Broken Hill Properties BHP. They became so rich, and as they expanded their business, they got into oil and gas. They ended up in shale gas in America, ended up in Trinidad. But last year, the company took a decision. The company decided to return to its core business and get out of its peripheral businesses outside of Australia, and they sold off their shale interests in America and whatever else, and they were in danger of selling off Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, the Ruby field was there, known to have oil. We need the oil produced for us here in Trinidad and Tobago, but it's not our field, and we don't have the money to produce anyway. So we had to talk to them. And what did your Prime Minister do? I traveled to Australia, to the company headquarters with my team, to sit down with the team at BHP at the very top, where the decision is made, to convince them that they should not pull out of Trinidad in that way, and that they could remain in Trinidad and Tobago because there's profit to be made here. And I didn't talk to any middleman or any messenger. Those kinds of conversations have to take place at the top where the decisions are made. And I could tell you, I was wearing a suit, nice pair of shoes, and a red and white and black tie. No pajama. And after that meeting, I was pleasantly surprised to hear that BHP has sanctioned that $500 million project, and the Ruby field is now to be developed, aiming to produce 1,600 barrels a day. Sorry, 16,000 barrels a day. Could you imagine that? 16,000 barrels a day. We need that in our economy. And your government had that as a priority. That was a priority. I can tell you, only yesterday in Whitehall, I met my team, we met with Shell in Whitehall, and we spent about an hour going over the prospects of greater investment in a fantastic project which you'll hear more about in the future with Shell here in Trinidad and Tobago. So while our advisors, our negativos were telling us that if we interfere with the tax regime, it will drive away foreign investment and la 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 la, because all them could see in a honey pot is lemon juice. We are telling you that major investment decisions are being made, and what they should have done and didn't do, when it was done, the benefits will come to us. We have negotiated away hundreds of millions of dollars in claims against NGC. We still have some left, but we did not just turn our backs on it and say, all fall down. We sat down there and negotiated. So some of those claims have now come off the table. We got a gas price contract agreed with BP. There was no agreement for a gas price sale going forward. When you hear the UNC and them talking about, all them could talk about is box drain, you know. I am talking about this country's lifeblood. The minute we agree to a sales price with BP, Shell agreed, EOG agreed, and both Shell and EOG are now producing much more than would have been produced had we not got a gas price. And of course, while Point Lisas is still under some curtailment, things are much better off there now than it was when we took over. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to let you know that your business and your country are in good hands. You see, it is easy to criticize. It is easy to criticize, especially when you are under no obligation to state what your position would have been. But in the case of the PNM versus the UNC, you have a great comparison. The 5-year period, 2010 to 2015. 2015 to 2019. Compare those two periods. One was a period of plenty and splurge, bacchanal and disrespect. This is a period of shortage, requiring intellect, honesty, and a belief in the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And with this PNM government, what you see is what you get. What we tell you we will do is what we will do. And that has been our history for 63 years. Tell that to your children. Tell that to your neighbor. And as for those who are opposed to us in the political arena, put that in your pipe and smoke it. So as we come now to talk about local government, you would have heard me 2 nights ago in Tunapuna telling you that we believe in local government reform. But there's work to be done in the parliament. There's work to be done in the courthouse, because that belief is not shared by our other colleagues. But the PNM believes in it, and we'll eventually get it done. We believe in the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and we don't expect that you will, with your eyes wide open, will go and put this country in the hands of those who would have done to you what they had done. And it's not too long ago for you to forget. You here in Faizabad, you know that a road is being built to Point 14, a highway, and there'll be a spur off that highway into Faizabad. But the only way we could have done that is to have gone to court when the original contractor, put there by the UNC, got bankrupt and went into court and jail for corruption in their home country, abandoned the project here in Trinidad, and the UNC minister took out the clause from the contract that says that if the contractor goes bankrupt, the government could fire the contractor and claim the bonds. Why would a government minister in Trinidad and Tobago approve that? That was done election week. You know how much money was involved there? You know how much the bonds that secured the contract was? $921 million. We went to court and fought that and won. We were then able, with the court's permission, to encash those bonds. And that is the money that we have been using to restart the highway project, and that work is going to give you a highway all the way to Point 14 without other expenditure. And unless the UNC is prepared to admit what they have done there and to apologize to the people, and everywhere they had to talk to the police, apologize to us for that kind of behavior, they are unfit to approach you on election day. They have a habit, every time we tell you what has happened to you and your business, they're talking about, we don't want to hear that. They blame the government. Who the devil do you want us to blame if it's you who do it? And why do you want the population to remain ignorant of these facts? I'm telling you now, we are building an overpass in Curep. We went out to tender among the same contractors. We're building it for $221 million. They were awarding a contract for $524 million. And you have to ask yourself, every one of you, who was getting that extra $300 million? And I don't know if any of you ever saw $1 million. You know what $1 million look like? You know what it is to have an extra $300 million? And to have one of your contractor friends suing the taxpayer for $1.2 billion? And you're all just sitting down here as if nothing happened? Well, I know when I'm being raped. And this country must know that too. Because if that is your record, I don't know what you will do next time. But I do know it wouldn't be anything better. And I'm not doing this for me or for you in this room. I'm doing this for Master Lamb of Labre and all those children who haven't written SCA yet. It is their future we're talking about. It is their future. And I'm not afraid of those who only see dark clouds in this country. I'm not afraid of those who only believe that all they have to do is to go on television every news cycle and talk foolishness or to write columns. You saw one of them came to the parliament tell you how I have an account in Miami, in a bank, $4 million come my name. Well, have no fear. That is in the right place where it belongs. That is in the courthouse. That's in the courthouse. I see you all getting it as news. It's news for you. Wasn't any news for me? From the day my name called, I know that was a lie. I don't have to wait until the police commissioner come and tell me that. Understood? But that is where it belongs. And I want to ask you all, ladies and gentlemen, you're adults, mainly adults in here. If a man had a record like that, you would want he? Men, gentlemen, if a woman had a record like that, you want she? Case closed. Case closed. There's no other consideration except one other. All the new people who are accreting onto the UNC, as Lloyd Best will say, them is people to watch. Ladies and gentlemen, I've had a wonderful evening down here with you in the Southwest. I have walked among you, I met your husbands, your wives, your children, and they all tell me to tell you, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, and we shall prevail.